Chapter 18. After the mysterious interview in the forechains, the one so abruptly ended there by Billy, nothing especially germane to the story occurred until the events now about to be narrated. Elsewhere, it has been said that in the lack of frigates, of course better sailers than line of battleships, in the English squadron up the straits at the period, the Bellipotent 74 was occasionally employed not only as an available substitute for a scout, but at times on detached service of more important kind. This was not alone because of her sailing qualities, not common in a ship of her rate, but quite as much, probably, that the character of her commander, it was thought, specially adapted him for any duty where, under unforeseen difficulties, a prompt initiative might have to be taken in some matter demanding knowledge and ability, in addition to those qualities implied in good seamanship. It was on an expedition of the latter sort, a somewhat distant one, and when the Bellipotent was almost at her furthest remove from the fleet, that in the latter part of an afternoon watch she unexpectedly came in sight of a ship of the enemy. It proved to be a frigate. The latter, perceiving through the glass that the weight of men and metal would be heavily against her, invoking her light heels, crowded sail to get away. After a chase urged almost against hope and lasting until about the middle of the first dog watch, she signally succeeded in effecting her escape. Not long after the pursuit had been given up, and ere the excitement incident thereto had altogether waned away, the master-at-arms, ascending from his cavernous sphere, made his appearance cap in hand by the mainmast, respectfully waiting the notice of Captain Vere, the solitary walking the weather side of the quarter-deck, doubtless somewhat chafed at the failure of the pursuit. The spot where Claggart stood was the place allotted to men of lesser grades, seeking some more particular interview, either with that officer of the deck or the captain himself. But from the latter, it was not often that a sailor or petty officer of those days would seek a hearing. Only some exceptional cause would, according to established custom, have warranted that. Presently, just as the commander, absorbed in his reflections, was on the point of turning aft in his promenade, he became sensible of Claggart's presence, and saw the doffed cap held in deferential expectancy. Here be it said that Captain Vere's personal knowledge of this petty officer had only begun at the time of the ship's last sailing from home. Claggart then, for the first in transfer from a ship detained for repairs, supplying on board the Bellipotent the place of a previous master-at-arms, disabled and ashore. No sooner did the commander observe who it was that now deferentially stood awaiting his notice, than a peculiar expression came over him. It was not unlike that which uncontrollably will flit across the countenance of one at unawares encountering a person who, though known to him indeed, has hardly been long enough known for thorough knowledge, but something in whose aspect, nevertheless now, for the first, provokes a vaguely repellent distaste. But coming to a stand and resuming much of his wonted official manner, save that a sort of impatience lurked in the intonation of the opening word, he said, "Well, what is it, Master-at-Arms?" With the air of a subordinate grieved at the necessity of being a messenger of ill tidings, and while conscientiously determined to be frank, yet equally resolved upon shunning overstatement, Claggart, at this invitation, or rather summons to disburden, spoke up. What he said, conveyed in the language of no uneducated man, was to the effect following, if not altogether in these words, namely, that during the chase and preparations for the possible encounter he had seen enough to convince him that at least one sailor aboard was a dangerous character in a ship mustering some who not only had taken a guilty part in the late serious troubles, but others also, who, like the man in question, had entered His Majesty's service under another form than enlistment. At this point, Captain Vere, with some impatience, interrupted him. "Be direct, man. Say impressed men." Claggart made a gesture of subservience and proceeded. Quite lately, he, Claggart, had begun to suspect that on the gun decks some sort of movement prompted by the sailor in question was covertly going on, but he had not thought himself warranted in reporting the suspicion so long as it remained indistinct. But from what he had that afternoon observed in the man referred to, the suspicion of something clandestine going on had advanced to a point less removed from certainty. He deeply felt, he added, the serious responsibility assumed in making a report involving such possible consequences to the individual mainly concerned, besides tending to augment those natural anxieties which every naval commander must feel in view of extraordinary outbreaks so recent as those which he sorrowfully said it needed not to name. Not at the first broaching of the matter, Captain Vere, taken by surprise, could not wholly dissemble his disquietude, but as Claggart went on, the former's aspect changed into resentiveness under something in the testifier's manner in giving his testimony. However, he refrained from interrupting him, and Claggart, continuing, concluded with this. "God forbid, Your Honor, that the Bellipotents should be the experience of the—" "Never mind that!" "Never mind that!" Here, peremptorily, broke in the superior, his face altering with anger, instinctively divining the ship that the other was about to name, one in which the Nore mutiny had assumed a singularly tragical character that for a time jeopardized the life of its commander. Under the circumstances, he was indignant at the proposed allusion. When the commissioned officers themselves were on all occasions very heedful how they referred to the recent events in the fleet, for a petty officer unnecessarily to allude to them in the presence of his captain, this struck him as a most immodest presumption. Besides, to his quick sense of self-respect, it even looked, under the circumstances, something like an attempt to alarm him. Nor at first was he without some surprise that one who, so far as he had hitherto come under his notice, had shown considerable tact in his function, should in this particular evince such lack of it. But these thoughts, and kindred dubious ones, flitting across his mind, were suddenly replaced by an institutional surmise, which, though as yet obscure in form, served practically to effect his reception of the ill tidings. Certain it is that, long versed in everything pertaining to the complicated gun-deck life, which, like every other form of life, has its secret mines and dubious side, the side popularly disclaimed, Captain Vera did not permit himself to be unduly disturbed by the general tenor of his subordinate's report. Furthermore, if in view of recent events prompt action should be taken at the first palpable sign of recurring insubordination, for all that, not judicious would it be, he thought, to keep the idea of lingering disaffection alive by undue forwardness in crediting an informer, even if his own subordinate, and charged, among other things, with police surveillance of the crew. This feeling would not, perhaps, have so prevailed with him were it not that upon a prior occasion the patriotic zeal officially evinced by Claggart had somewhat irritated him as appearing rather supersensible and strained. Furthermore, something even in the official's self-possessed and somewhat ostentatious manner in making his specifications strangely reminded him of a bandsman, a perjurious witness in a capital case before a court-martial, ashore of which, when a lieutenant, he, Captain Vera, had been a member. Now, the peremptory check given to Claggart in the matter of the arrested allusion was quickly followed up by this. You say that there is at least one dangerous man aboard. Name him. William Budd, a foretopman, Your Honor. William Budd? Repeated Captain Vera with unfeigned astonishment. And mean you the man that Lieutenant Ratcliffe took from the merchantman not very long ago, the young fellow who seems to be so popular with the men, Billy the handsome sailor, as they call him? The same, Your Honor, but for all his youth and good looks, a deep one. Not for nothing does he insinuate himself into the goodwill of his shipmates, since at the least they will, at a pinch say, all hands will, a good word for him, and at all hazards. Did Lieutenant Ratcliffe happen to tell Your Honor of the adroit fling of Bud's jumping up in the cutter's bow under the merchantman's stern when he was being taken off? It is even masked by that sort of good-humoured air that, at heart, he resents his impressment. You have but noted his fair cheek. A man-trap may be under the ruddy-tipped daisies. Now the handsome sailor, as a signal figure among the crew, had naturally enough attracted the captain's attention from the first, though in general not very demonstrative to his officers. He had congratulated Lieutenant Ratcliffe upon his good fortune in lighting on such a fine specimen of the genus Homo, who in the nude might have posed for a statue of a young Adam before the fall. As to Billy's adieu to the ship's rights of man, which the boarding lieutenant had indeed reported to him, but in a differential way, more as a good story than aught else, Captain Vera, though mistakenly understanding it as a satiric sally, had but thought so much the better of the impressed man for it, as a military sailor admiring the spirit that could take an arbitrary enlistment so merrily and sensibly. The foretopman's conduct, too, so far as it had fallen under the captain's notice, had confirmed the first happy augury, while the new recruit's qualities as a sailorman seemed to be such that he had thought of recommending him to the executive officer for promotion to a place that would more frequently bring him under his own observation, namely the captaincy of the mizzen-top, replacing there in the starboard watch a man not so young, whom partly for that reason he deemed less fitted for the post. Be it parenthesized here that since the mizzen-top men have not to handle such breadths of heavy canvas as the lower sails on the mainmast and foremast, a young man, if of the right stuff, not only seems best adapted to duty there, but in fact is generally selected for the captaincy of that top, and the company under him are light hands, and often but striplings. In sum, Captain Vere had from the beginning deemed Billy Budd to be what, in the naval parlance of the time, was called a king's bargain, that is to say, for His Britannic Majesty's naval, a capital investment at small outlay, or none at all. After a brief pause, during which the reminiscences above mentioned passed vividly through his mind, and he weighed the import of Claggart's last suggestion, conveyed in the phrase "man-trap under the daisies," and the more he weighed it, the less reliance he felt in the informer's good faith. Suddenly he turned upon him, and in a low voice demanded, "Do you come to me, master-at-arms, with so foggy a tale? As to Budd, cite me an act or spoken word of his confirmatory of what you in general charge against him. Stay," drawing nearer to him, "heed what you speak. Just now, and in a case like this, there is a yardarm end for the false witness." "Ah, your honour," sighed Claggart, mildly shaking his shapely head, as in sad deprecation of such unmerited severity of tone. Then bridling, erecting himself, as in virtuous self-assertion, he circumstantially alleged certain words and acts which collectively, if credited, led to presumptions mortally inculpating Budd, and for some of these averments, he added, substantiating proof was not far. With grey eyes, impatient and distrustful, essaying to fathom to the bottom of Claggart's calm violet ones, Captain Vere again heard him out, then for the moment stood ruminating the mood he evinced. Claggart himself, for the time liberated from the other's scrutiny, steadily regarded with a look difficult to render, a look curious of the operation of his tactics, a look such as might have been that of a spokesman of the envious children of Jacob, deceptively imposing upon the troubled patriarch the blood-dyed coat of young Joseph. Though something exceptional in the moral quality of Captain Vere made him, in earnest, encounter with a fellow man, a veritable touchstone of that man's essential nature, yet now, as to Claggart and what was really going on in him, his feeling partook less of institutional conviction than of strong suspicion, clogged by strange dubieties. The perplexity he evinced proceeded less from aught touching the man informed against, as Claggart doubtless opined, than from considerations how best to act in regard to the informer. At first, indeed, he was naturally for summoning that substantiation of his allegations which Claggart said was at hand, but such a proceeding would result in the matter at once getting abroad, which in the present stage of it he thought might undesirably affect the ship's company. If Claggart was a false witness, that closed the affair, and therefore, before trying the accusation, he would first practically test the accuser, and he thought this could be done in a quiet, undemonstrative way. The measure he determined upon involved a shifting of the scene, a transfer to a place less exposed or observation than the broad quarterdeck. For although the few gunroom officers there at the time had, in due observance of naval etiquette, withdrawn to leeward the moment Captain Vere had begun his promenade on the deck's weather side, and though during the colloquy with Claggart they of course ventured not to dismiss the distance, and though throughout the interview Captain Vere's voice was far from him, and Claggart's silvery and low, and the wind in the cordage and the wash of the sea helped the more to put them beyond earshot, nevertheless the interview's continuance already had attracted observation from some topmen aloft and other sailors in the waist or further forward. Having determined upon his measures, Captain Vere forthwith took action. Abruptly turning to Claggart, he asked, "Master-at-arms, is it now Bud's watch aloft?" "No, your honour." Whereupon Mr. Wilkes, summoning the nearest midshipman, "Tell Albert to come to me." Albert was the captain's hammock boy, a sort of sea valet, in whose discretion and fidelity his master had much confidence. The lad appeared. "You know Bud, the foretopman?" "I do, sir." "Go find him. It is his watch off. Manage to tell him, out of earshot, that he is wanted aft. Contrive it that he speaks to nobody. Keep him in talk yourself, and not till you get well aft here. Not till then let him know that the place where he is wanted is my cabin. You understand? Go. Master-at-arms, show yourself on the decks below, and when you think it time for Albert to be coming with his man, stand by quietly to follow the sailor in." Chapter 19. Now, when the foretopman found himself in the cabin, closeted there, as it were, with the captain and Claggart, he was surprised enough, but it was a surprise unaccompanied by apprehension or distrust. To an immature nature, essentially honest and humane, forewarning invitations of subtler danger from one's kind come tardily, if at all. The only thing that took shape in the young sailor's mind was this: "Yes, the captain, I have always thought, looks kindly upon me. Wonder if he's going to make me his coxswain. I should like that. And maybe he is going to ask the master-at-arms about me." "Shut the door there, sentry," said the commander. "Stand without, and let nobody come in. Now, master-at-arms, tell this man to his face what you told of him to me," and stood prepared to scrutinize the mutually confronting visages. With the measured step and calm, collected air of an asylum physician approaching in the public hall some patient beginning to show indications of a coming paroxysm, Claggart deliberately advanced within short range of Billy, and, mesmerically looking him in the eye, briefly recapitulated the accusation. Not at first did Billy take it in. When he did, the rose tan on his cheek looked struck as by white leprosy. He stood like one impaled and gagged. Meanwhile the accuser's eyes, removing naught as yet from the blue dilated ones, underwent a phenomenal change, their wonted rich violet color blurring into a muddy purple. Those lights of human intelligence, losing human expression, were gelidly protruding, like the alien eyes of certain uncatalogued creatures of the deep. The first mesmeristic glance was one of serpent fascination. The last was the paralyzing lurch of the torpedo fish. "Speak, man!" said Captain Vera to the transfixed one, struck by his aspect even more than by Claggart's. "Speak! Defend yourself!" Which appeal caused but a strange dumb gesturing and gurgling in Billy. Amazement at such an accusation so suddenly sprung on inexperienced nonage this, and, it may be, horror of the accuser's eyes, serving to bring out his lurking defect, and in this instance for the time intensifying it into a convulsed tongue-tie, while the intent head and entire form, straining forward in an agony of ineffectual eagerness to obey the injunction to speak and defend himself, gave an expression to the face like that of a condemned vestal priestess in the moment of being buried alive, and in the first struggle against suffocation. Though at the time Captain Vera was quite ignorant of Billy's liability to vocal impediment, he now immediately divined it, since vividly Billy's aspect recalled to him that of a bright young schoolmate of his whom he had once seen struck by such the same startling impotence in the act of eagerly rising in the class to be foremost in response to a testing question put to it by the master. Going close up to the young sailor and laying a soothing hand on his shoulder, he said, "There is no hurry, my boy. Take your time. Take your time." Contrary to the effect intended, these words, so fatherly in tone, doubtless touching Billy's heart to the quick, prompted yet more violent efforts at utterance. Efforts soon ending for the time in confirming the paralysis and bringing to his face an expression which was as a crucifixion to behold. The next instant, quick as the flame from a discharged cannon at night, his right arm shot out, and Claggart dropped to the deck. Whether intentionally, or but owing to the young athlete's superior height, the blow had taken effect full upon the forehead, so shapely and intellectual-looking a feature in the master-at-arms, so that the body fell over lengthwise, like a heavy plank tilted from erectness. A gasp or two, and he lay motionless. "Fated boy!" breathed Captain Vera, in tone so low as he beat almost a whisper. "What have you done?" "But here, help me." The twain raised the felled one from the loins up into a sitting position. The spare form flexibly acquiesced, but inertly. It was like handling a dead snake. They lowered it back. Regaining erectness, Captain Vera, with one hand covering his face, stood to all appearance as impassive as the object at his feet. Was he absorbed in taking in all the bearings of the event, and what was best not only now at once to be done, but also in the sequel? Slowly he uncovered his face, and the effect was as if the moon, emerging from eclipse, should reappear with quite another aspect than that which had gone into hiding. The father, in him, manifested towards Billy thus far in the scene, was replaced by the military disciplinarian. In his official tone he bade the foretopmen retire to a stateroom aft, pointing it out, and there remain till thence summoned. This order Billy in silence mechanically obeyed. Then going to the cabin door where it opened on the quarterdeck, Captain Vera said to the sentry without, "Tell somebody to send Albert here." When the lad appeared, his master so contrived it that he should not catch sight of the prone one. "Albert," he said to him, "tell the surgeon I wish to see him. You need not come back till called." When the surgeon entered, a self-poised character of that grave sense and experience that hardly anything could take him aback, Captain Vera advanced to meet him, thus unconsciously intercepting his view of Claggart, and interrupting the other's wonted ceremonious salutation, said, "Nay, tell me how it is with yonder man," directing his attention to the prostrate one. The surgeon looked, and for all his self-command, somewhat started at the abrupt revelation. On Cleggart's always pallid complexion, thick black blood was now oozing from nostril and ear. To the gazer's professional eye, it was unmistakably no living man that he saw. "Is it so, then?" said Captain Vera, intently watching him. "I thought it, but verify it." Whereupon the customary test confirmed the surgeon's first glance, who now, looking up in unfeigned concern, cast a look of intense inquisitiveness upon his superior. But Captain Vera, with one hand to his brow, was standing motionless. Suddenly, catching the surgeon's arm convulsively, he exclaimed, pointing down to the body, "It is the divine judgment on Ananias. Look!" Disturbed by the excited manner he had never before observed in the Bellipotent's captain, and as yet wholly ignorant of the affair, the prudent surgeon nevertheless held his peace, only again looking an earnest interrogatory as to what it was that had resulted in such tragedy. But Captain Vera was now again motionless, standing absorbed in thought. Again starting, he vehemently claimed, struck dead by an angel of God, yet the angel must hang. At these passionate interjections, mere incoherences to the listener as yet unappraised of the antecedents. At these passionate interjections, mere incoherences to the listener as yet unappraised of the antecedents, the surgeon was profoundly discomposed. But now, as recollecting himself, Captain Vera, in less passionate tone, briefly related the circumstances leading up to the event. "But come, we must dispatch," he added. "Help me to remove him," meaning the body, "to yonder compartment, designated one opposite that where the foretopman remained immured." Anew, disturbed by a request that, as implying a desire for secrecy, seemed unaccountably strange to him, there was nothing for the subordinate to do but comply. "Go now," said Captain Vera, with something of his wonted manner. "Go now. I presently shall call a drumhead court, tell the lieutenants what has happened, and tell Mr. Mordaunt," meaning the captain of marines, "and charge them to keep the matter to themselves." Full of disquietude and misgiving, the surgeon left the cabin. Was Captain Vera suddenly affected in his mind, or was it but a transient excitement brought about by so strange and extraordinary a tragedy? As to the drumhead court, it struck the surgeon as impolitic, if nothing more. The thing to do, he thought, was to place Billy Budd in confinement, and in a way dictated by usage, to postpone further action in so extraordinary a case to such time as they should rejoin the squadron, and then refer it to the admiral. He recalled the unwonted agitation of Captain Vera and his excited exclamations, so at variance with his normal manner. Was he unhinged? But assuming that he is, it is not so susceptible of proof. What then can the surgeon do? No more trying situation is conceivable than that of an officer subordinate under a captain, whom he suspects to be not mad, indeed, but yet not quite unaffected in his intellects. To argue his order to him would be insolence. To resist him would be mutiny. In obedience to Captain Vera, he communicated what had happened to the lieutenants and captain of the marines, saying nothing as to the captain's state. They fully shared his own surprise and concern. Like him, too, they seemed to think that such a matter should be referred to the admiral.